If you are with us this morning, find your Bibles, go to 1 Timothy chapter 6. And we should be in just a minute. You'll bear with me a second. Try to get this thing done up here. Wake everything up before. All right, good. First Timothy. We've been on Corinthians. Like I said, it's been kind of a ride around here, being in First Timothy for several weeks in a row. But we did get Brother Don back last Wednesday night. Good to see everyone here. Good to see those that are gathering with us online. I realize this is, I think, the last weekend before a lot of folks start back to school. So it's one of those kind of Sundays as far as the local work goes. A lot of times you see a one last chance to go out for the weekend, but nevertheless, glad you're here. We began 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and we read through verses 1 and 2 last week, talking about bondservants, and we didn't talk a lot about being servant, master, slave, the situation, and we're not going to belabor that, only just pointed out that in the first two verses of chapter 6 of Timothy, the Apostle Paul shows that how unique the gospel is. You went into an environment where you have a slave-master relationship, and suddenly you have a doctrine, a teaching, a way of thinking, the gospel, this business model, if you will, according to the gospel, that the slave is honoring the master is giving due consideration to the slave, and there is a unique work environment where, as we pointed out last week, where in that environment, while we have our situation that we dealt with in the 17, 18, 1900s, that circumstance, when you deposited Christianity into that society that functioned economically that way, that it made it better. It changed, and actually I believe it truly led to the dissolution of what was known as slavery. And it became what the Bible instructed it to be. And so I just wanted to make that point, because he is talking at the end of this chapter about money. Greed. Again, we've already had some discussion about it so far. If you think about what the overseers must do, what was one of the qualifications when it comes to money that a elder must possess? When we talked in chapter 3 about the qualifications of elders in 1 Timothy.
Not greedy.
Not greedy. So the leader, one of those that oversees, I say leader, but truly they are a servant of the church, and they could not be greedy of filthy lucre, as the King James used to refer to that terminology. But the love of money brings all kinds of evil. Trying to see where I want to pick up to read here. I did, at the very end of class last week, we did talk a little bit about the gospel of greed. Because when you read 1 Timothy, the Spirit expressly says, this is in chapter 4, that the Spirit says that in latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits, the doctrines of demons. And you'll go, well, there's no way that we can have this revelation and then people would teach this kind of doctrine. I mean, Jesus died. The apostles, they didn't die rich. They didn't make money. They didn't extort money out of people. In fact, we'll see with the Apostle Paul in the reading there about contentment that he had learned whether to have it or not have it. It didn't really matter. He was going to do his work. But we have an entire system of theology. The funding. Let me get this out here as plain as I can. The funding of churches, those that are functioning under the auspices, that they are Christian groups, that they will pledge money to our ministry and you'll receive money in return. And that's the doctrine. Now, Creflo Dollar, I don't know if he's still on the air. I had to, it said from such withdraw yourself. I did. But, he repented 2 weeks ago of the tithing business. Now it's called grace giving. And I think he may be in for more money than he had before when he gets through tweaking it. But, he's worth millions and millions of dollars. And he's done so with that exact teaching. And man, there's no way anybody can do that. When I was in Dallas, this guy here was Robert Tilton. And I'm going to share with you something that at the end of the service last week that Linnell shared with us about this type of thing. Tilton's supporter, Tom Crowley, sent money. The widow was still receiving the minister's fundraising appeals 5 months after her husband's death. And one of the letters said, God spoke to me this morning specifically about you, Tom. He's going to heal you. Crowley needed to pay Tilton up to $100 vow of faith in hopes of recovery. He'd been dead for 5 months. I told the story of the man I knew in Jacksonville where when his father passed away and the Catholic priest came in and was asking for $2,000. And Linnell shared with us a story after last week's class of a group of ladies. She's a hairdresser downtown Little Rock for years in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And there was a lot of women that were all there together, members of the church, and one of the ladies who was not raised in the church shared with them a story that her mother died and she was 7. She was a young girl, and the priest came and asked, the father had to make payment to get out of purgatory, and she remembered so well because the family went hungry. She remembered the time when she went hungry, and so here's Creflo in 1999, and when they get wired up, well, you need to hear about money, because you ain't going to have no love, no joy, no peace until you get some money. We established last night that you are not whole until you get your money. Amen? Amen? That's the kind of language that you hear. And that's on VTN. It's right here in Little Rock. The station, and there's the originator of that with Jeannie and Happy. Gratefully acknowledge your financial contribution to Agape. You've sown a seed in good ground. You're entitled to as much as 100-fold return in your seed. Starting with Mark 10, 29 and 30. In fact, me and the young guys last week did this very study. Mark 10, 29 and 30. Surely I say to you that there is no one who has left house or brother or sister or father or mother or wife or children or lands for my name's sake in the gospel, who shall not receive 100-fold now in this time houses and brothers and sisters and mothers and children and lands with persecution, and in the age to come eternal life. So they took that verse, quoted it, and said that if you give, you lose, you'll gain. And so if I read that and I make the literal application, then what I have to do is, well, I can't get it to stay on there. Hang on a minute. What's it going? Where's it going? It ain't going to stay on there, is it? Does Mark 10 really teach if you give up a house that you get a whole subdivision of houses? I'll get it out there whether I can read it or not. So if you read that text, that means I give up, well, I don't want 100 kids. So you see what the point is. It's not talking about you give up your house and you get 100 houses. He's talking about whatever sacrifice you make in the physical sense will be manifested, like in this family right here. You have hundreds of brothers and sisters and lands. In other words, we provide for each other, and that's exactly, hey, what do we talk about in 1 Timothy 5? Family, take care of your family. The widow indeed. We are obligated to care for them. And that is one of the things that I'm worried about as churches, because, since whatever, 8 years, however long it's been going to the retirement community. And there are always members of the church there. Ladies and men. And I guess when you get old enough to go to one of those places, you're out. You don't get to worship anymore, and you don't really get to have the opportunity. You retire from that. I don't know that God ever designed that when you got to that 80-year-old range that then you just go somewhere and spend the next 3 years by yourself on Sunday. Anyway, I digress, or I progress. It's a serious thing, brother, that we ought to give consideration to. Precious friend, thank you. This is Mike Murdoch. He was the one that made me quit because I was ready to throw my shoes through the TV. Precious friend, thank you for partnering with me. The gospel is your greatest investment. So you put money in that. This is specifically, he has constructed some $81 number out of the Old Testament. You send $81. It's all a scam. Seed guarantees divine favor. Your seed creates a covenant with God. Expect uncommon help, uncommon favor, uncommon wisdom, and the greatest financial breakthrough ever. Let me tell you this. People that are sitting in their homes and they are going through the deepest, darkest depression. He has encapsulated everything that probably has them in a state of discontent and told them if they'll send him money that it'll go away. And, the size of your seed always determines the size of your harvest. They're on TV right now. 2 Timothy 2:12 through 19, the wages of unrighteousness. It is a companion text to 1 Timothy 4 and 6. That is, like natural brute beasts, made to be caught and destroyed. Now I want you to listen, because when we just read through what these men said, and you go, wow, that is awful. That's tragic. The incident with the young girl going hungry while a Catholic priest took money from the family on a doctrine that they made up to finance the church. With the purgatory and buying indulgences and things of that nature, and it exists. It's throughout. But then we say, well, it doesn't. That's just in Catholicism. No, it's weaving its way into the church, and it's this bill of sale. It's this trying to cash out, if you will. It's trying to get money, and you create a doctrine. Listen to what it sounds like. The wages of unrighteousness, those who count it pleasure to carouse in the daytime, they love getting on the TV and doing that sort of thing. Their spots and blemishes carousing in their own deception while they feast with you. They have forsaken the right way, going after the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of righteousness and was rebuked for his inquiry. A dumb donkey speaking with the man's voice restrained the madness of the prophet. He became so bent. We can become so bent on having it. And We read from the text when Balak, he said, hey, I was going to really put you in a high position had you gone through with this. But here's the question from our text. Many will follow their destructive ways, 2 Peter 2:2 says, about these deception. And they have a heart trained in covetous practices, trained in how to extort money, trained in how to deceive. So, the question, from such withdraw yourselves. What does that mean? Because remember, this is a book that's going to Ephesus. This is a letter and a man going to Ephesus to preach. And when he teaches the doctrine, back to 1 Timothy chapter 6. And from such withdraw yourself. What does that mean? Verse 5. Useless wranglings of men destitute of the truth, supposing godliness is a means of gain. From such withdraw yourself. The doctrine is the doctrine of demons. You get friends and involved in that, then you need to warn them. See, you remember we talked a little bit. Look at chapter 5 at the very end of 1 Timothy 5. Remember, this is the letter of evangelism. This is how we're going to evangelize. And he says, meditate on these, chapter 5, verses 4. Some men's sins, chapter 5, verse 24. Some men's sins are clearly evident, preceding them to judgment, but those of some men follow later. You got to be careful. You need to listen through, and you need to listen through to the end. And what is the end of the doctrine? If in fact this guy, now I don't know how old he is now, but I know Benny Hinn is getting on up there, and some others of these health and wealth prosperity preachers are teaching. What's happening with their blessing from God? What's happening to your blessing from God according to that text? If you're doing well, if you're financially prosperous and you're physically healthy and you don't have any problems, then you're in good standing with God. If you have problems and you're struggling and you have an infirmity, then you're not doing well with God. What's the danger in that doctrine? Where's your faith riding? Where is the faith? Your
financial results.
Yeah, faith is in your feelings. How do I feel today? That's my relationship with the Lord. I feel terrible. God doesn't like me. I get up tomorrow, I feel great. Is that how we run? And that sometimes it is. There's a way that seems right, but the end thereof is the way of death. And this is a doctrine. This is a teaching that is extremely popular. The Bethel church movement. Now, and I tried to, see if I can pull that up real quick. Because the teaching has not gone away. And people say, well, that's old news. It's not. This group here, these are now your mega churches and some of the contemporary worships and the Bethel music and the Shakers, the Quakers, the Pentecostals. This is a YouTube clip of their own worship service. And the times that I've been to the services, that some point when this emotional hysteria is reached is when we might break into a song where we pass the plate and sing, it's free, oh yes I know it's free, and no I didn't make that up. But while I was at the Pentecostal church on the highway out there, on a Tuesday night meeting, they started out with a little supposed to be a Bible study. It got a little out of control. But when the songs started up, there was a song that began, it's free, oh yes, I know it's free. I've never heard a song repeated that many times. You know, that's the phrase repeated that many times in one setting. And then they passed the plate 2 times. 2 times. And that is what you see. That's what you witness in these meetings. So they're real. I'm just trying to get you to where that we can see that they are. And Paul. There you go. That's what I wanted to get to. The Apostle Paul thought it so clear. I tell you, even weeping, that these are enemies of the cross of Christ, whose end is their destruction, whose God is their belly, whose glory is their shame, who set their mind on earthly things. You know, here's the thing. Verse 6 beginning. Now godliness with contentment is great gain. So we're pouring something into all of our lives. We just made a comment about physical health and doing well financially, being okay financially, and having things okay in our lives. The same things that we want. But one man said in this teaching that Timothy has to go attack and tell everybody to get away from it. One says godliness is financial gain. The other says godliness with contentment is great gain. It's profitable in all things. It's already said that about in contrast to exercise. Bodily exercise profits a little, but godliness is profitable for what? For all things. So, let's read. Beginning in verse 6. Now, godliness with contentment is great gain. And he's doing that in contrast to somebody that would say godliness is a means of gain. What's the difference between godliness being great gain and godliness being a means of gain? Think quick.
One is the means, the other is the end result.
One's the end result. The content, so it's a condition of mine. It's not, you did not cause contentment. It came to you because you applied godliness. People say you go get godliness and you get money. That's what he's doing. I mean, he's making the contrast. With godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought, and so we have now how to look at it. Where does contentment come from? And we got a few minutes to get to this. Where does contentment come from? It's from this mindset. We brought nothing into this world, and it is certain that we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. Everybody good on that? We are not, are we? Are we? We are very frail in our society, aren't we? I mean, we live on the edge of you know, we're frail in the sense that our security is built up in, you know, our home and our you know, having financial security. And these things are not wrong. And I think that the principles that we learn through Proverbs and all those, it teaches those things. But when it comes to what Timothy was about to do in evangelism, all of those things were left on the table. The Apostle Paul, did he make his living off of the gospel? Sometimes he was supported, other times he wasn't. He's the apostle. Now, what happens if we have such a meeting in a room like this and it's going to talk about me? You know, our structure that we've gotten comfortable with is to make certain that we have all the comfortable amenities. And, you know, the evangelist book here in Timothy says, let's get elders in place. You know, the evangelist has his work to do. And he works himself out of a job, or he works himself into, you know, doing what under the oversight of elders, where we continue to evangelize like we do. But it was never designed just to be like we often do, you know, where we preach to the choir. And that's the thing that we have to push. We brought nothing into this world. It is certain we carry nothing out. Having food and clothing, with these be content. This is the thing that will change our lives so that we can focus on spiritual things. That's it. We are so wrapped up. And in the United States of America, more than any other place, I mean, only compared to Rome back in the day, I would say, as far as the prosperity that we have enjoyed, but then also the insecurity that comes from our trust in the financial gain. Over at Philippians chapter 4, the success that we're talking about, Paul, I believe, trying to convey to this young evangelist, I rejoice greatly, he says, the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. Philippians 4. What you've seen and heard me, these do. What did he do? I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, verse 10 of chapter 4. At last your care for me has flourished again, though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Paul's sitting there in need. And he's writing to them and saying, okay, so what you've seen me do, you do. And then he says, but I rejoice greatly that you have sent care. Not that I speak regard to need, for I have learned. So I believe Paul is instructing us as well, and telling Timothy when he talks to him in chapter 6, I have learned in whatever state that I am to be content. Have you ever had to learn that? Everybody know what it means to learn contentment? Do you learn contentment? Anybody ever learned contentment? Are we all stuck in discontent? How do you learn contentment? You have?
Through suffering.
Okay. Through suffering. How did that come into the picture? Why? How do you know contentment? Why do I have to learn contentment? Because I'm discontent. Because things aren't going well. So discontentment must have something to do with the deception. My perception of what I need gets skewed, gets off course, and I get off course. He says it this way, in everywhere and in all things, verse 12, I've learned how to both be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Nevertheless, you have done well that you shared in my distress. He was in distress. He talks about it that way. He was in a situation. I don't know to what desperate nature it was, but he had learned whatever it was, and maybe it was that he had to get up in the morning and go to the store and sell tents. Maybe that was his distress. I don't know, but you know what? He had a lot of things that he could be discontent about, and he was not. The deception of discontent, financial struggles. Make a list of things that can put you in a state of discontentment, whether it be financial, whether it be singleness, sometimes, when we're alone, single, and lonely, or stuck in an unhappy relationship, or a physical disability is brought into a relationship, and now, things are different in that respect. Things are changed. Chronic health issues. Sometimes these issues, they process our minds, they occupy our minds on a daily basis, and can lead to discontent. Paul had learned in whatever state, whether he was in the need, in the suffering, whether he was receiving the gift, that he was not affected. And that's the hard part. Because if you got somebody to send you something that you needed, you think, well, now I'm happy. If we put ourselves in that position spiritually, I'm happy because I received some financial need that I had out there, and so now I'm happy spiritually because I got that financial need covered. What's wrong with that picture? What happens if it doesn't get covered? What if you don't get it to cover? What if you don't get the money to cover it? Your spiritual prosperity condition on getting the money, you didn't get the money. Guess what you do? You lose your faith. How many times have people walked away from the Lord in and among the discontent of that? Because discontent breeds, it brings resentment, bitterness toward God and toward others. And we pierce ourselves through with many sorrows. All right, I'm going to read up through. Verse 9 and 10. Those who desire to be rich fall into temptation. We'll stop with that. Those who desire. Started that word. Those who desire. What have we already determined previously that was very important about desire in this book? It's been a whole lesson built. Those who desire what? The office. The position of an elder. So everything that Timothy is being instructed is to deal with desire. And the last thing he's talking about, Timothy, you better get your mind together about money, and you better be ready to teach. Remember what I asked you? If he went to Ephesus, if Timothy took the book, the inspired letter from Paul, jumps in the chariot, now I figure he walks, but anyway, he goes to Ephesus. He goes to Ephesus, and Alexander and Hymenaeus are there. They got all the money. And the people are there, and he's going to say, they are not with us. Now they're saying they are, and he's going to go in with the doctrinal teaching and say, they are not with us. Withdraw from them. I mean, it was a hard job. But when he goes in there, he doesn't have money. They do. What's going to be the effect if you're employed by Hymenaeus and Alexander in the silversmith business and making Diana statues? What's going to happen to your job? If Timothy comes in, says Hymenaeus and Alexander are doing falsely, and you quit, you're out. We don't put ourselves into those kind of categories and those kind of thought processes. But what if your job, your boss, to set compromise? Yes. It should get stronger unless you. So the thing is that the discontent or resentment will allow it to compromise. And this is the part that he's really emphasizing. We're going to finish up here, and then we will pick up with a final lesson a week from Sunday, Lord willing. Those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into a foolish and hurtful and harmful lust, which drowned men in destruction and perdition. Drowned them. Drowned. Listen to his language. Drowning in destruction, perdition. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, from which some, having strayed from their faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. It did not bring what they thought. It didn't bring them the relief or the comfort. Content. That is, Lord, I will receive what you give. I will lack what you withhold. I relinquish what you take. And as we did last week, I will sing, it is well with my soul. All right, let's post up there, and we'll pick up verse 11, the good confession, and run through the end of the book, because he gets to 17 and 18. I guess some of the rich folks went with the truth, because he has an admonition for those that are rich at the very end, that are in the Lord's body. So we'll look forward to that next week.